The plasma restraints bit into Commander Jace Thorne's wrists as he was dragged through the obsidian corridors of the Kethvarian palace. His infiltration gear hung in tatters, scorched by energy weapons, but his jaw remained set in defiant silence. The mission had gone to hell. His team scattered or dead, but intel on the alien weapon shipments was worth the risk, even if it killed him. The massive doors to the throne chamber groaned open, revealing a scene from humanity's darkest medieval fantasies rendered in alien chrome and crimson. Dozens of pale green-skinned courtiers lined the walls, their elongated limbs adorned with bioluminescent tattoos that pulsed with anticipation. At the chamber's heart sat a throne carved from what looked like living bone, and upon it, Queen Zeltharin. Even through his pain, Jace had to admit she was striking. Her skin held the subtle luminescence of sea foam, unmarked by the ritual scarification favored by her courtiers. Cascading red curls framed angular features that spoke of both cruelty and intelligence, while amber eyes studied him with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. She wore form-fitting armor that accentuated her lithe figure, each piece etched with the conquered worlds of her empire. So, her voice carried across the chamber, melodious yet sharp as a blade. "This is humanity's finest. How disappointing." Laughter rippled through the court. Jace said nothing, meeting her gaze without flinching. The queen rose gracefully, her movements predatory as she descended the throne steps. "Do you know what you are, soft flesh? You are entertainment, a curiosity. Your species sends its warriors to steal from us, thinking your primitive cunning sufficient against the might of the Kethvarian Empire." She gestured, and a courtier approached bearing an ornate weapon, the ceremonial energy whip. Its crystalline handle pulsed with contained energy, designed not merely to wound but to rewrite neural pathways, amplifying pain beyond endurance. "This," she said, running her fingers along its length, "has broken the minds of beings far stronger than you. Warlords of 3 systems have begged for death after mere minutes. But humans," she smiled coldly, "humans intrigue me. Let us see how long your soft mammalian flesh can endure before that spark of defiance leaves your eyes." The first lash struck like liquid fire across his back, tearing through his torn uniform to carve a burning line into skin. Neural disruptors in the energy beam sought his pain centers, trying to overwhelm his nervous system. Round him, the court fell silent, waiting for the inevitable screams. Jace bit down hard enough to taste copper, every muscle tensing against the unnatural agony that felt like his spine was being dissolved in acid. But he didn't cry out, wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The second strike came harder, then a third. By the 5th, his back was a map of scorched flesh and flowing blood, the neural disruptors working overtime to turn each nerve ending into an instrument of torture. Still he stood. Still he met her eyes. The queen paused, her expression shifting from cruel amusement to genuine surprise. "Fascinating," she murmured, circling him like a predator studying wounded prey. "Your pain receptors should be completely overwhelmed by now. Your species' primitive neural architecture should have collapsed under the strain, maybe." Jace managed through gritted teeth, his voice rough but steady. "You don't know humans as well as you think." For the first time since his capture, something flickered in those amber eyes, not cruelty or boredom, but curiosity, real curiosity. "We shall see," Queen Zeltharin said softly. Setting aside the whip, "Guards, return him to the holding chambers. We will continue tomorrow." As they drag him away, Jace caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. In the depths of the Kethvarian palace, something had shifted. Neither captor nor prisoner understood it yet, but the first crack had appeared in walls that had stood for centuries. The real test was just beginning. The next morning arrived with the hollow chime of Kethvarian bells, their resonance vibrating through the palace walls like a funeral dirge. Jace had spent the night in a cell that was more torture chamber than prison walls that pulsed with a sickly bioluminescence, temperature that fluctuated between Arctic cold and desert heat, and a constant subsonic hum designed to prevent sleep. He'd slept anyway. Humans were adaptable like that. When the guards came for him, Jace walked to the throne room under his own power, ignoring the fresh pain that lanced through his scarred back with every step. The court had gathered again, their pale faces hungry. For spectacle. Queen Zeltherin waited on her throne. The energy whip coiled beside her like a sleeping serpent. Today she wore ceremonial robes that shifted color with her movements, deep purples that bled into crimson, as if the fabric itself thirsted for violence. "I trust you slept well," she said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Today's session will be educational." The first lash came without warning, splitting open yesterday's wounds. Jace grunted but remained standing, blood already beginning to flow down his back. The court murmured appreciatively. "Tell me, human," the queen purred between strikes, "what thoughts occupy that primitive mind of yours as pain consumes your flesh?" Jace spat blood, then looked up with a grin that made several courtiers step back. "I was wondering if that's the best you've got, Your Majesty. Because honestly, I've had massage therapists with stronger hands." The throne room fell silent. Then, impossibly, a few nervous chuckles rippled through the assembly. The queen's amber eyes flashed dangerously. "Perhaps you need more encouragement." The next strike was vicious, designed to drop him to his knees. Jace staggered, but stayed upright. "You know what this reminds me of? Boot camp. Had a drill sergeant who thought pain was the only teacher. Poor bastard never learned that you can't break what's already been forged." More laughter. Less nervous this time. Some of the younger courtiers were openly grinning. The queen noticed, her expression darkening. "You think this is amusing?" Another. "Lash your flesh parts like water before my power." "Sure does," Jace agreed cheerfully, even as fresh agony tore through him. "But pain's just electricity, isn't it? And electricity follows the path of least resistance. Problem is, Your Majesty," he winked at her, the audacious gesture sending shocked murmurs through the court, "I'm pretty damn resistant." This time the laughter was open, several nobles openly applauding his wit. The queen's grip tightened on the whip's handle. "Silence," she snapped, her composure cracking. "This creature mocks our traditions." "Not mocking," Jace corrected, swaying slightly but keeping his feet. "Just wondering when the real entertainment starts. Because if this is Kethvarian theater, no wonder your tourism industry is struggling." Even some of the guards were fighting. "Smiles now." The queen stared at him, frustration and something else, curiosity, warring in her features. "You enjoy this?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Enjoy's a strong word," Jace admitted, "but I've got to say, the company's better than expected." "Present company accepted, of course." He nodded toward the laughing courtiers. "They seem like fun at parties." Lord Vexthal, a particularly ancient noble, actually clapped. "Magnificent, such spirit." "Your Majesty, this human has more entertainment value alive than dead." Others nodded agreement. The queen looked round her court, seeing something she'd never witnessed before. Her people genuinely delighted by defiance rather than cowering in fear. It was unsettling. "Enough," she said quietly, setting aside the whip. "Return him to his cell." As the guards moved to escort him away, Jace called over his shoulder, "Same time tomorrow, Your Majesty. I'll try to work up some new material." The queen watched him go, her mind churning. In 20 years of rule, no one had ever turned her throne room into a comedy stage. No one had ever made her courtiers laugh at pain instead of cringe from it. "Your Majesty." Lord Vexthal approached cautiously. "The human, he is most unusual." "Yes," she murmured, still staring at the bloodstains Jace had left behind. "Most unusual indeed." That night, Queen Zeltherin stood on her private balcony overlooking the palace dungeons, amber eyes fixed on the faint glow emanating from one particular cell. She told herself she was merely studying her prisoner, analyzing this strange human resilience. She almost believed it. 5 days had passed since the court sessions began, and whispers now followed Queen Zeltherin through the palace corridors. Her nobles spoke in hushed tones about the human who wouldn't break, who turned torture into entertainment, who somehow made their sovereign's absolute power seem questionable. Tonight, she descended to the dungeons alone. Jace sat in his cell, methodically doing push-ups despite the lattice of healing scars across his back. He looked up as her footsteps echoed in the corridor, unsurprised by her presence. "Your Majesty," he said, not bothering to stand. "Bit late for a social call, isn't it?" "I have questions," she said, stopping just outside the energy barrier. That contained him, up close, without the theater of the throne room. She seemed smaller somehow. More real. Shoot. He resumed his exercise routine. Why? The single word carried more weight than any royal decree. Why do you endure this? Why not beg for mercy, or at least show proper fear? Jace completed another push-up before answering, because fear's a choice, and I choose not to give you that power over me. Power, she laughed, but it sounded hollow. I am queen of 7 systems. I command fleets that could glass your home world. I hold absolute power over billions of lives, do you? He finally stood, wiping sweat from his brow, because from where I sit, you're trying pretty hard to impress one guy in a cell. That doesn't sound like absolute power to me. Her eyes flashed dangerously. Choose your words carefully, human, or what? You'll torture me. He shrugged. Been there. Done that. Got the scars to prove it. She stared at him for a long moment, then waved her hand. The energy barrier dissolved with a soft hum. Jace raised an eyebrow but didn't move. You could try to escape, she observed. Could. Won't. Why not? Because I gave my word I wouldn't try to escape during our little chats. A man's only as good as his word. You gave no such word. Just did. Consider it a gentleman's agreement. She stepped into the cell, close enough now that he could see the subtle patterns of bioluminescence beneath her skin, could smell the strange floral scent that clung to her. What is a gentleman? Someone who keeps his promises, who protects those weaker than himself, who earns respect instead of demanding it. Respect is taken, not earned, she said automatically, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Tell me, Your Majesty, when your people see you in the corridors, do they smile? Or do they look away and hope you don't notice them? The question hit like a physical blow. She'd never thought to look. Royal protocol demanded that subjects avert their eyes in her presence. But now, thinking back, she realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her with genuine joy. They show proper deference, she said stiffly. That's not the same thing. Jace sat on the narrow cot, gesturing for her to join him when she hesitated. He added, I'm not going anywhere, and honestly, standing around making dramatic proclamations gets old fast. Despite herself, she sat. The simple act felt strange, almost rebellious. Queens didn't sit on dungeon cots with prisoners. On my world, Jace continued, we had leaders who ruled through fear. They never lasted. Know why? Because humans are weak and chaotic, she replied, but again without conviction. Because fear only works until something scarier comes along. But loyalty, real loyalty, that's earned through trust, through proving you'll sacrifice for your people instead of demanding they sacrifice for you. That lasts. Your species is young, she said, naive. You don't understand the complexities of ruling an empire. Maybe, but I understand people. And I've seen what happens when leaders care more about being feared than being worthy of following. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on them both. My ancestors built this empire through strength, she said finally, through showing our enemies that defiance meant death. And what did that get you? A court full of people who laugh at your tortures and whisper behind your back. She turned to face him, amber eyes blazing. You dare, I dare because someone needs to. When's the last time anyone told you the truth instead of what you wanted to hear? The question hung between them like a challenge. She could order his death with a word, could have him flayed alive for his insolence. But instead, she found herself thinking, really thinking, about when someone had last spoken to her as an equal rather than a deity. You're trying to manipulate me, she said quietly, am I? Or am I just talking to you like you're a person instead of a title? She stood abruptly, the moment of vulnerability passing. This conversation is over. Same time tomorrow, he called as she reactivated the barrier. She paused at the corridor entrance, not looking back, perhaps, but as she walked away, Queen Zeltherin found herself thinking not about the human's words, but about the way he'd looked at her not with fear or worship, but with genuine interest, as if she were someone worth knowing rather than something to be feared. It was a dangerous thought, and she couldn't stop thinking it. The emergency klaxons shattered the pre-dawn silence of the palace, their wailing cry echoing through corridors. that had known only whispered conversations for generations. Queen Zeltherin stood in her war room, holographic displays showing the mining colony of Vethkaler in chaos. Her generals surrounded the tactical table, their faces grim. The miners have barricaded themselves in the main facility, reported General Caxthan, his scarred features twisted with disgust. They demand better working conditions, reduced quotas, and he spat the words like poison. Representation and colonial governance. Crush them, advised Lord Vextel coldly. Make an example that will prevent future uprisings. The Queen stared at the display, watching tiny figures moving through the mining complex. Each dot represented a life, a being with hopes and fears and families. When had she stopped seeing them as individuals? The orbital bombardment platforms are ready. Your Majesty, General Caxthan reported, we can reduce the facility to slag within the hour. And the refined dilithium deposits, she asked, acceptable losses. The rebellion must be stopped before it spreads. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled nobles. This was the Kethvarian way, swift, brutal, final. But as she prepared to give the order, Queen Zeltherin found herself thinking of amberite conversations in dungeon cells, of laughter in throne rooms, of the difference between fear and respect. Bring me the human, she said suddenly. The war room fell silent. Your Majesty. General Caxthan looked confused. Commander Thorn. Bring him here. Now. Within minutes, Jace was escorted into the war room, still wearing his torn uniform, but standing straight despite the healing wounds on his back. He took in the tactical displays with professional interest. Mining revolt? He asked, as if discussing the weather. Yes, she replied, watching his face carefully. My advisors recommend immediate suppression. Jace studied the displays, noting troop positions, facility layouts, casualty projections. How many miners? 3,412. General Caxthan answered stiffly, including dependents. Families, Jace corrected quietly. You mean families? The general's face darkened, but the Queen raised a hand for silence. What would you do? She asked Jace. Every noble in the room stiffened. The idea of asking a prisoner an enemy for strategic advice was unprecedented, treasonous. Even Jace was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical situation. I'd go talk to them. Talk, Lord Vextel laughed harshly. To rebellious slaves. To people who are desperate enough to risk their lives for change. Jace corrected. People don't rebel because they're happy. They rebel because they've got nothing left to lose. They are property of the crown, the general snarled. Their grievances are irrelevant, are they? Jace turned to face the Queen directly. What do you think they want, really want? I mean, not what your reports tell you they want. She found herself actually considering the question. Better conditions, food, safety for their children, right? Basic stuff, human sentient needs. So the question is, does giving them some of what they want cost you more than losing the entire mining operation? The precedent, Lord Vextel began. The precedent of treating people like people instead of equipment. Jace interrupted. Yeah, that's a dangerous precedent. Might lead to them actually wanting to work for you instead of against you. The Queen stared at the display, her mind racing. Everything she'd been taught said to crush their rebellion, to show strength through violence. But Jace's words echoed in her thoughts. Fear only works until something scarier comes along. You would go yourself, she asked, into the facility. If you let me, they would kill you. You're human, an outsider, an enemy. Jace shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe they'd listen to someone who understands what it's like to be on the wrong end of power. The room erupted in protests. Your Majesty, this is madness. You cannot trust the alien. The risk to crown authority. Enough. The Queen's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She looked at Jace, seeing something in his eyes that she'd never seen in her court. Absolute sincerity. He wasn't trying to gain advantage or curry favor. He genuinely believed he could help. If you do this, she said quietly, if you go to Vethkaler and somehow resolve this without bloodshed, what would you want in return? Nothing, he said simply. Nothing. I don't want your miners to die. I don't want your soldiers to die. I don't want you to have to live with the memory of ordering a massacre. That's enough. She stared at him, this impossible human who offered to risk his life for people he'd never met, in service to a cause that wasn't his own. Everything about it violated every principle of power and politics she'd ever learned. "General," she said finally, "prepare a transport. Commander Thorne will accompany a diplomatic mission to Vethkaler. Your Majesty, he will be under my personal protection," she continued, her voice brooking no argument. "Anyone who harms him will answer to me directly." As the room erupted in fresh protests, she moved closer to Jace, close enough to speak without being overheard. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for me?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, a warmth that had nothing to do with strategy or politics. "Because I've seen who you really are," he said quietly, "underneath all the crown and ceremony and fear, and she's worth saving." The words hit her like a physical blow, stirring feelings she'd thought buried beneath decades of royal duty. As their transport lifted off toward the mining colony, Queen Zeltharin realized that somewhere in the depths of her dungeon, she'd found something far more dangerous than a prisoner. She'd found hope. The mining facility's main chamber had been transformed into an impromptu negotiation hall, with representatives from both sides seated around hastily ranged tables. Jace had spent for hours talking with the miners, listening to their grievances, understanding their fears. Now he stood before Queen Zeltharin as she prepared to address the assembly. "They want safety inspections every month instead of yearly," he reported quietly. "Increased food rations for the children, and they want a say in who gets promoted to supervisor positions." Reasonable requests, she admitted, surprising herself. A month ago, she would have seen any demands from subjects as intolerable insubordination. "There's one more thing," Jace added. "They want to know that their queen sees them as people, not just production units." Their eyes met across the chamber, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended politics and species. She nodded slowly. The negotiations concluded with unprecedented success. No bloodshed, no destroyed infrastructure, no martyrs to inspire future rebellions. Instead, the miners returned to work with renewed vigor, and productivity actually increased in the following weeks. But it was the aftermath that changed everything. 3 days after their return to the palace, Queen Zeltharin dismissed her guards and visited Jace's cell once more. This time, she deactivated the energy barrier without hesitation. "The court is displeased," she said, settling beside him on the narrow cot that had become their informal meeting place. "I imagine they are. Successfully negotiating with rebellious slaves probably doesn't fit their worldview. Lord Vexthal has called for a formal inquiry into my judgment. Others whisper about my dangerous fascination with alien influences." Jace turned to face her fully, noting the exhaustion in her amber eyes. "Are you having second thoughts about the negotiations?" "No, they were the right choice." She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "About you, I should be." The admission hung between them like a challenge. Slowly, carefully, Jace reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm, softer than he'd expected, and he could feel the subtle pulse of bioluminescence beneath her palm. "Zell," he said, using her name for the first time without the royal title. "You shouldn't say your name." "Why not? It's beautiful. You're beautiful." She stared at their joined hands, her political mind warring with emotions she'd kept buried. "For decades, this is impossible. You're my prisoner. I'm your captor. We're different species. I've tortured you, and I've forgiven you," he said simply. "Have you forgiven yourself?" The question broke something loose inside her. Tears she'd never allowed herself to shed began falling, each one carrying years of suppressed doubt and loneliness. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I am," she whispered. "Then be yourself. Not the queen, not the conqueror, not the fear-bringer. Just Zell." She looked up at him, seeing not judgment, but acceptance in his eyes. "What if I don't know who that is anymore? Then we'll figure it out together." The kiss, when it came, was gentle, a question rather than a demand. She answered by melting into his embrace, decades of rigid control dissolving in the warmth of human compassion. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "The court will never accept this," she said against his lips. "The court can adapt or find new employment," he murmured, pulling her closer. What followed was tender and urgent at once, a claiming and a surrender. A political revolution expressed in whispered endearments and gentle touches. As barriers of flesh and spirit fell away, the Queen discovered that power shared was power multiplied. That vulnerability could be its own form of strength later. As they lay entwined on the narrow cot, Zell traced the scars she'd carved into his back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. They're proof that some things can't be broken. The nobles won't stop conspiring. They'll see this as weakness. Let them come." Jace's voice carried quiet confidence. "You've got something they don't." "What's that?" "People who'll fight for you instead of just obeying orders." He was proven right sooner than expected. The assassination attempt came at dawn, launched by a coalition of traditionalist nobles who saw the Queen's alien corruption as an existential threat to Kethvarian supremacy. But when the energy weapons started firing, it wasn't just the royal guard who stepped forward to defend their sovereign. Miners from Vethkalar, inspired by their Queen's newfound compassion. Palace servants who'd been treated with dignity for the first time in their lives. Even young nobles who'd grown tired of ruling through fear rather than merit. The rebellion was crushed not by superior firepower, but by the simple fact that more people wanted to protect Queen Zeltharin than wanted to destroy her in the aftermath. As prisoners were processed and new policies drafted, the Queen made her final choice. Standing before the assembled court with Jace at her side, no longer prisoner, but partner, she announced the dawn of a new era. "Fear is the tool of the weak," she declared, her voice carrying to every corner of the throne room. "True strength comes from earning the loyalty of those we serve. Yes, serve for a ruler who does not serve her people is no ruler at all." The transformation wasn't instant or complete. Change never is. But as the months passed, as reforms took hold and prosperity spread through systems that had known only oppression, Queen Zeltharin and Commander Jace Thorn proved that love could indeed conquer empire. Not by destroying it, but by making it worth loving in return. And in the palace gardens, where once only the royal family had walked, children of a dozen species played together while their parents worked side by side, building something new from the ashes of the old. The human had endured and changed everything. The end.